Welcome to Front Office Pros, brought to you by the Front Office Pros, Steve and Joe. Today, we're going to be talking about Dynasty wide receiver rankings and tiers. We did the same exercise a few months ago, but we're back, giving you an updated version with rookie wide receivers. Before we get started, we are a new channel, so if you enjoyed this video, smash that subscribe button to show your support.
Hike!
So heading over to tier 4, this is a kind of an interesting tier. I think will be somewhat of a shocker a little bit of what I got here. But at number 15, I got Davante Adams. Obviously, he's at towards the end of his career. He's been an elite player. I think he'll still be good, and my bias is somewhat against him. I don't like the fit with him and Jimmy Garoppolo. I have a lot of concerns, about him. But there's no denying the type of player that Davante has been, during his time, in his career. So that's why I've got him here. At number 14, this will be a shocker to you, but I got Tyreek Hill. We know Tyreek Hill is going to retire in 2025. This is what he said. He had this little dust up at the marina in Miami, I want to say, that happened. But I think he'll be okay. I don't think anything's going to happen there. I think Tyreek should continue. My feeling is I think he's going to take a slight step back this season. I think Jalen Waddle, my thinking is Waddle will become more a part of the offense. I think Tyreek Hill, maybe he has somewhat of as good of a season as he did last year. I definitely don't think he'll do better than what he did last year. Now, Tua could be there for the whole season, but that's a real question. We don't know how healthy Tua can be. And that, I would say, Tua being the quarterback is going to impact Tyreek Hill's ability, in his production greatly. So we know that he's done in 2025, which to me doesn't, really help things. So that's why I've got him at 14. At number 13, I've got Cooper Kupp. He's an interesting one. He's another one that I feel like isn't being talked about a lot. Coming off a couple injuries. Yeah, right. But he's a guy that coming off a couple injuries. You've got Matthew Stafford, which you and I both have talked about. I don't know what's going on with him. But so long as he plays, there's him and Stafford, Kupp that is, have had a really good rapport and have done really, really well. I can't, and if you see that offense, I mean, they don't have a lot going on there. I mean, they've got Cam Akers, he's okay. They've got Higbee, and he's okay. But who else do they have besides Cooper Kupp? They don't really have anybody, and that guy's a target machine. Nobody gets targets like Cooper Kupp. And he's around the same age as Tyreek Hill and Davante Adams. So wouldn't you rather have Kupp than these guys? I don't know why people aren't talking more about him.
So you're not buying the Van Jefferson hype that's kind of been going on Twitter here?
No. I mean, there were games that he had goose eggs. I mean, we know. I mean, we know receivers really break out in year 3. Year 3 is that year where they really just, it doesn't mean they can't break out in year 1 or year 2, but if they haven't yet, year 3 is like that year. And if they don't, then it's like, I don't know. I want to say Van Jefferson's been in the league for at least 2 years, if not 3, off the top of my head. You could check to be sure from my standpoint. But yeah, no, I'm not buying the Van Jefferson thing. And at number 12, I've got Stephon Diggs. He was a tough one for me to evaluate. I do think that what the chatter we've been hearing is nonsense. I mean, I do think he is upset, but I don't think it's going to translate to anything. His contract is so huge. The Bills really don't have any option. He doesn't really have any option to go anywhere else. And I'm not really sure why he would. I mean, if you look at his career, he was good in Minnesota, but he has been phenomenal with the Bills. And Josh Allen's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. I mean, unless he's trying to go to the Kansas City Chiefs, I don't really know what he's going to try to do. So, and who even knows if they'd be able to do what they need to do to get him and why the Bills would even trade him there. So there's just too many obstacles. So I really had a hard time with him. I think it's one of those things where I think he probably has 2 good years left. And I trust the structure around him with Allen, more so than I do for Cooper Kupp in Tyreek Hill and Devontae Adams, and that's why I have him there. But Joe, what are your thoughts on my tier 4?
Yeah, I think your tier 4 is pretty fair. Not too many complaints. As you mentioned, Cooper Kupp is definitely a guy that is getting slept on right now. I think just part of that is, everyone is sleeping and so low on Matthew Stafford that I think it's just, clouding their judgment on Cooper Kupp and his ability to be the guy. But like, if Stafford plays, I'm assuming he's going to be healthy, and it's hard to imagine, him being bad. And if he's in there, he's going to target Cooper Kupp, and I don't see why like Cooper Kupp's not going to be a productive receiver, with Stafford there, as long as the neck stays healthy and everything like that. I don't know. I think definitely people are sleeping on him, and I think people are sleeping on Matthew Stafford, honestly. And back to Van Jefferson, you're right. This upcoming year is year 4. He's played 3 years in the league here, so he definitely didn't break out last year. Offense was kind of so. I think that's possibly people are trying to write it off, but Cooper Kupp is the guy, and Higbee will get some targets here and there and have his games. But Matt Stafford's in there. He targets Cooper Kupp. He's the guy. Interesting your comments with Tyreek Hill taking a step back. I just don't know, man. Like, everyone thought he was going to take a step back last year after leaving Patrick Mahomes, and the guy had 1,700 yards last year, and that was with not a full season with Tua. I think Tua's going to be around. I'm not saying he repeats or gets more, but I don't know if Waddle still takes over and he does take that step back this year.
Yeah, I think, if I could clarify, I think for me it was, obviously these are dynasty rankings, so I'll be talking about some of the guys in the tiers coming up here. So we know that these guys are short term, but I just like Kupp and Diggs' situation better than I do Tyreek Hill. I mean, to me, volume is king, and there is nobody better than Cooper Kupp. And then obviously Diggs, I mean, he's been an absolute stud these past few years. So, I mean, not that Tyreek Hill isn't. I think it's a preference thing at the end of the day. I would not be upset or not disagree if you or anyone else, had Tyreek Hill a bit higher. I can understand why people would have it that way. I just think for me, at the end of the day, I like those other options better.
Yeah, it's fair enough. I mean, we're honestly splitting hairs. I mean, Diggs had 11 less receptions than Tyreek Hill last year. It just so happens that Tyreek Hill had 300 more yards. So,
yeah, well, that's his yards after the catch ability right there.
Yeah, that's just his big play ability for sure.
So heading over to tier 3, I've got some interesting players on this list. At number 11, I've got DK Metcalf. This one might be the most surprising one. But I do think that DK, he's younger, obviously, but he's really shown that potential to be a big play receiver. And I thought he would take a step back with Geno Smith, and he's continued to be, a very solid receiver. So I also think if he got an even more elite quarterback, I think he could be even better. I think, there's not many receivers that are built with his frame. So I would admit probably some bias there, but I do really like the prospects of DK moving forward. Then number 10, I've got Chris Olave. I like Chris Olave. I do think that people are crowning him way too quickly. I like the combination of him and Carr, and I think that Olave could take a significant jump this upcoming season. He had a really good season last year. But I think people are a little bit too quick to think that Olave is going to take this huge jump. I think Carr is a good quarterback. He's not great. And I think when I started looking into the numbers more, he's really just been mediocre. Now, what he did with Devontae Adams, and how he supported him, I mean, there's no denying that. But Olave and Adams are not the same type of receiver. So I think, and plus they do have Michael Thomas still on that roster if he can stay healthy, which is a big if. Well, I would agree with you, but I just don't think it's being treated as a foregone conclusion that Olave is going to be this guy. And I'm not so sure. I definitely think I'd say I'm about a 60-70% confidence level, but I think people are talking about it as if it's 90 or 100. Then at number 9, I got Devonta Smith. I was really concerned about his frame coming into the NFL. That's where I've talked to you in the past, Joe, where there are players that come into the league that are outliers, they're unicorns, they don't fit the typical mold. You think they're he's like built like a toothpick. He's going to get eaten alive out there. And last year, I mean, he proved me wrong. I mean, he had a great season as a Robin to AJ Brown's Batman. So that offense isn't going to slow down anytime soon. It's one of the most higher-powered offenses with Jalen Hurts. So I got him there at 9. Then number 8, I got T. Higgins. Not really too much to say here. I mean, again, one of the more high-powered offenses in Cincinnati. There have been actually games where you could look at between Higgins and Chase. Higgins has actually been the better player. The one thing that's interesting about him will the Cincinnati Bengals be able to retain Burrow, Higgins, and Chase? And if not, where does Higgins go? But I'm not really that concerned if he does go somewhere else. I think he really is a great player. So no matter, I mean, now he could sign to like a really bad team, and then he chases money, and then it's a whole different conversation. But I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. I really like his. I think he's going to be a great player moving forward. Now, last player I got in this tier 3 at number 7 is Amon-Ra St. Brown. He is one of those target machine type of players. They just pepper him with targets in Detroit, and him and Goff definitely have a connection. Question will be what will happen post Goff, or if they re-sign Goff. I guess things will continue to stay as is. He's a guy that I'm not necessarily like, jumping up and down for. I think he's good. I think there's some other players that I'm more excited about. Even lower, way lower on this list. But it's tough to deny what he's been able to do so far. But Joe, what are your thoughts on my tier 3?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you're lower than Chris Olave than a lot of people are. Especially being that you got another second-year receiver in your tier 2, and I think a lot of people, and I think it could make sense that some people would have Olave higher than that guy that you have in tier 2. I agree with you. Carr is definitely a mediocre, middle of the road quarterback, but it doesn't mean that he can't support players. We've seen even the Darren Wallers of the world that he's played with have really good years. So even though I do think I agree with you, and Carr is that mediocre guy, but I think he can support Olave, and there's that year 2 breakout at the receivers that can potentially happen. And I think Olave's in line for a potential big year this year, and it takes a big leap forward in the wide receiver ranks.
So you'd have Olave higher?
Yeah, I'd probably have Olave higher, especially, I saw some stats regarding Devonta Smith, and I'm, a little concerned about him if Goddard stays healthy this year. There was a big discrepancy between his production when Goddard was on the field and versus when he was off the field. And a lot of his bigger games were when he wasn't on the field. So if Goddard's able to stay healthy this year, given that he's on the same pace for targets that he was last year, curious to see how, over a course of a season, how that could affect Devonta Smith.
Interesting. That was definitely a good tidbit there, Joe. I didn't know that. So heading over to tier 2, at number 6, I've got Jalen Waddle. Not really much to say. I mean, I think this is a consensus, place where people would put Waddle. He's young. He's really shown the ability to have great production. I think he will be the vocal point of that offense moving forward, especially post Tyreek Hill. He just, he's electric with the ball. So I think, makes a ton of sense for him to be here. At number 5, this is the jump that you're talking about, which I've got Garrett Wilson. This is where I got to be careful, and I think it's important, for us in the fantasy community, kind of be able to own up where we've made mistakes. And I think for me, one of the things that I've learned with Garrett Wilson was I had him really low in as far as my rankings, as a rookie last year. And not necessarily because of the player. I attribute it because I just really, really, really didn't like Zach Wilson. I thought he was an absolute bust, and he was. But I guess despite that, Garrett Wilson showed that he was a really good player. And now you've got Aaron Rodgers coming in. And now that Aaron Rodgers is in, I mean, it's a complete reversal. And I think Aaron Rodgers is really going to do wonders with Garrett Wilson and really invest in him. I mean, he is the bona fide number one receiver in that offense. And we know what Rodgers has been able to do over his career with the likes of Devontae Adams and Jordy Nelson and Randall Cobb and all these guys. So I think Garrett Wilson is really going to take a significant jump. And that's why I have more confidence in Rodgers and Rodgers and Garrett Wilson than I do with Carr and Olave. I just think it just, and plus, not that I really like Hackett very much. I told you I didn't like him as a hire for the Broncos, but him and Rodgers, for whatever reason, have a good rapport and they've done well in Green Bay. But can we really say the same about what they're doing with the Saints and with Dennis Allen as the head coach? He's defensive-minded head coach. So I don't know. And Robert Saleh is too. I'm just saying I think there's a rapport there as an offensive coordinator with Hackett and Rodgers. Then at number 4, I've got A.J. Brown. Some would say that he should be a tier 1 player, but I think there's enough of a separation in my mind to have him be in tier 2 and not in tier 1. He really took a huge step this past year, and I continue to see him doing what he's doing. Honestly, primarily the reason why is really due to age, and the other factor is I just think that these guys are just that much better as a player. But Joe, what are your thoughts on tier 2?
Yeah, I mean, I love Garrett Wilson. I think he's a phenomenal talent, phenomenal player. I told you, thought he was the best player in last year's draft, and he really showed that as a rookie. I guess the one thing that gives me a little bit of pause, and Rodgers coming over is definitely a huge upgrade and a plus, but just the fact that they brought in, the likes of Allen Lazard and Randall Cobb, guys that Rodgers are familiar with, I don't know. I mean, there's definitely more guys and more mouths to feed in New York than there is with the Saints and Chris Olave. So, I mean, I definitely think that, the volume definitely could be higher for Chris Olave with the Saints. I mean, who's taking away targets from Olave, which, I mean, I don't know. We'll see. But I think that's kind of the potential case between Olave and Garrett Wilson there.
So heading over to tier 1, at number 3, I've got CeeDee Lamb. Some would argue that CeeDee Lamb should be a tier 2 player. I don't believe so. CeeDee Lamb really took that jump in his 3rd season last year with Dak Prescott, with Amari Cooper out of the offense. CeeDee Lamb was really able to flourish. And to me, he's young. He really commands that offense. I'm really high on CeeDee Lamb. I think he's a great player. I actually think, for whatever reason, the fantasy community also is sort of not as high on Lamb. I don't really know why.
Because of Dak Prescott.
Yeah, it might be. I mean, Dak can definitely be kind of Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde sometimes. But I really like Lamb. Then number 2, this will be a little bit of a shocker, but I think you could agree with me at the end of the day. But I actually got Justin Jefferson at number 2. And the big reason why is because what does life look like after Kirk Cousins? That's my concern. I mean, there's no denying what Justin Jefferson did last year. I mean, an absolute elite season. But can we really expect that year in, year out for the rest of his career? I mean, that's pretty unrealistic. I mean, we're talking, if that's the case, we're talking Jefferson, being like one of the best receivers of all time, Jerry Rice-esque type of player. I'm not saying that he can't eventually get to that point, but at some point things I think could slow down. And there's a lot of what ifs when it comes to what life will be like after Kirk. I still have him at tier 1. I still have him as a second best receiver. I just then at the end of the day at number 1 have Jamar Chase. I think Chase is younger. He has had to share a lot of targets, with T. Higgins. whereas Jefferson has really had the fortune of being that guy. I know he's had Adam Thielen, but Adam Thielen is not, you can't compare him and T. Higgins. And when it comes to Jamar Chase, it's going to be him and Burrow for probably the rest of their careers. And Burrow's one of the best quarterbacks in the entire NFL. So to me, you have to bake that in there, when it comes to comparing the two. So to me, I think it's very close. I couldn't argue if you decided to flip-flop the two. But if push came to shove and I had to choose, I think at the end of the day, Chase is a safer bet for the next, 5-10 years. But Joe, what are your thoughts on my tier one?
Yeah, at initial glance, when I first looked at it, I was a little surprised he had Chase over Jefferson. But I get you. To me, they're 1A, 1B. They're really great players, early players. They deserve to be in the tier one for sure. And I get there's definitely far more stability with Chase in Cincinnati than there is with Justin Jefferson. Like you said, after Kirk Cousins, who's the quarterback going to be? Will they, be able to still support him? I don't think it really. I think he's honestly probably quarterback proof. I don't think it really matters, but we'll see. It would be a lot different of a story, if they go from Kirk Cousins to a rookie. That could definitely impact him a little bit. Where Chase, I assume they're going to at least lock down Chase and Burrow, and with that connection for years to come, like you said, it's hard to deny Chase at number one.
So that does it for our wide receiver rankings with tiers. If you enjoyed this video, you can like it. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and go ahead and put a comment below. Do you agree or disagree with my rankings that I put in there? I'll probably get some tomatoes my way, I'm sure. But that's a part of the process. That's what I have as my rankings, and hopefully you can compare and contrast with others out there in the industry to help inform you on how you're going to construct your dynasty teams. But thank you so much for watching, and until next time.